Hey everyone, my name is Daniel, and in today's video, we're going to take a look at all of these features for Copilot Studio, including the new ones announced at Ignite of 2024 in Chicago. And who better to do this for us than Dewain Robinson? Dewain is a principal product manager of both Copilot Studio and conversational AI at Microsoft, and he does a fantastic job going over all of these features. So what he first does is actually talking about data, the fundamentals. Can your data be defined as structured or unstructured? Because once you've done that, now you can start looking at which of these Copilot features is the right one for you. He does a fantastic job explaining all of that and even demonstrating some of it. So I highly urge you to watch this entire video, and I also recommend subscribing to his YouTube channel, whose information I've put in the link window. So let's get started, but first, here's my intro video.
Hey, Dwayne. Finally, I got to grab some time off your super busy schedule. So I really thank you for joining us. And before we deep dive head down into the Copilot Studio, like, why don't you just take a few seconds to introduce yourself? Like, where did your journey begin? And bam, you are here right now leading the Copilot Studio path. So if you, kind of enlighten us a little bit about yourself and your journey so far.
Yeah, so I've been at Microsoft now for about 19 years, and yes, so I started off. Yes, there was this really cool new technology, Daniel, when I started at Microsoft that we had just released, which was this thing called Windows XP, and and so yeah, so this is where the Microsoft journey kind of started for me in the consulting space, and then throughout the years, over like about let's just say over like about a 12-year period, ended up becoming the lead architect for automotive for Microsoft worldwide. And as part of that, we would do a lot of like integrated into automobiles, like conversational agents. So while you're driving, talking to the vehicle and stuff like that. And that kind of pulled me over into where I started discovering conversational AI and moved into the bot framework, which then of course, got merged into Power Virtual Agents, which then became what we know now as Copilot Studio.
Cool. So that actually gives a good segue to the reason that we are meeting. There has been an explosive growth in the Copilot Studio side. Now it's input into the biz chat side as well. So the questions, and I know you've done videos on that as well, but I'd like to have this conversation going is that there's so much content already available out there. I know we call that as knowledge. There's so much knowledge already out there. And one of the things is that when to use what. When can I go ahead and leverage my existing content, my existing knowledge in a great source of content management in SharePoint? When can we leverage that versus when can we, start putting in our own new content? Help us think it through that, and just, when to do what in specific situations for building our custom agents.
Yeah, so what you're going to find, and I tell people that if you really start to think about Copilot Studio, think about all the different components within it, and then those different components, as you're thinking about them, I like to explain to people that it's almost like think of ingredients. If you have salt, you have pepper, you have eggs, you have flour, right? Like you can make all these different things with these different ingredients and think of it as different experiences that you can do. And so making sure you understand those different major components, like understanding that, a topic is where I'm like in full control and I'm going in and I can build kind of like logic and combine it with other things, because like a topic which you're going to have where you can like author a very simple conversation, but you can also call Power Automate flows and call actions and call knowledge through that if you wanted to do some sort of additional logic around it. So topics are like think of it as like sort of the most powerful thing where you can get as much control as you could possibly imagine. And then as you move into like the other major assets, which I'll talk about a little bit, knowledge, which is your SAS-based RAG pattern, a lot of people look at that and they think that RAG is the only way to use generative AI because that's what everyone associates to ChatGPT and things like that. And it's very useful when you're wanting to ask questions and get answers. It's going to do a combination of searching over things and then summarization is kind of what you get when you do RAG, which for those that don't know, retrieval augmented generation, that's the same thing as search over the data and summarize like ChatGPT does. So what I would tell you is what we run into people who don't think about like the actual data that they're trying to interface with and the behavior they're looking for. And so sometimes they think, oh, everything is RAG, and that everything should be knowledge. But what you really start to get into is you have to think about, is my data structured? Is it unstructured? Is it that what I want to do with it am I wanting to query it and get answers? But what if I want to interact with it? What if I want to do something where I create something or update something, which would be like a post or a patch versus a get action on an API? When you get into this world, you start getting into actions, which actions is also generative AI, but it's done in a different way. It's where I have APIs that have structures, I can explain the structures and all of those different things. And it gives you the ability to really be able to explain the structure and also take action on behalf of that. So I can do not just a get, but I can do a post or a patch, which is, and if you're not familiar with that, I can create something new with a post, or a patch is an update to a record. So if I say, what's the status of my help desk ticket? That's a get, right? Yeah. If I say, I want to create a new help desk ticket, that's a post. And then if I say I want to update a help desk ticket, that's a patch. And so when you look at that and having the ability to do all of that, you can do all of that over structured data inside of actions really, really well. And what's going to make it even more complicated, Daniel, because it really comes down as the maker, you need to start, like I told you, it's like salt and pepper, it's like eggs and flour. Mm. You want to think about how you start to combine these things to be able to get what you want, because another thing we're really working on, and you'll see this in the Knowledge for Dataverse, if you like click into that thing and you're looking at a table, we're starting to make it where we can explain the structured data knowledge itself, so that if you wanted to say, here's a table which has rows and columns, right? And I want to explain what those columns mean so that you can understand the rows of data that are inside of it, like inside of the Dataverse table. What really makes it cool is that, think of it if I could do that, and the thing we're doing with knowledge now is we're starting to evaluate a couple of key concepts, which is, could we make it where you could just understand what the person is saying and what they're talking about, understand the structure of the data, and then dynamically create the query that lets you find what you're looking for, so that you're not in actions. It's like I'm doing a post action, I'm doing a get action. I'm still going to have to like ask you what kind of query this thing's going to do. But imagine if the query became dynamic, and that's kind of what you're starting to see in the Dataverse knowledge space. So this stuff is going to kind of merge together. So you have to kind of think about, well, what am I actually trying to do? Should I do that with an action because I'm going to want to ask a question or dynamically ask you questions to figure out the inputs and the outputs that you want? Or am I just wanting to use this as knowledge, and I want to be able to get answers from knowledge on unstructured and maybe even in the future some structured data? And so all of those different things, or maybe one of the things, Daniel, is I want to do something where I combine those things, or I want to write my own custom thing, and that's a topic. So you got to kind of bring all that together. And then there's this one last piece, which I think a lot of people forget about, which is a key component of a conversational platform, which is variables. And the variable management is becoming a really important thing, because that's how I store context and reuse it over and over in the conversation or within a topic. And this is where it's really, really kind of cool what we're doing there, because you'll start to see us treating a variable as something you can explain. And you'll see us talk about that as an input or an output, which is something we'll explore as we kind of talk a little bit further. I know we're going to get into some conversation around dynamic chaining. And in that, you'll start to see all this stuff starting to come together, and you can imagine all the cool things that you can create. So it's kind of interesting.
It is. One of the things
hard to wrap your head around.
Before we get into dynamic chaining, I think it's important for the audience to just give like a quick 1-2 minute overview on the concept of structured versus unstructured data. And for those who are watching this, I've also he's got a really good video on this. It's there in the description below. So like if you want to, get more information on that, go watch his video. But Dewain, for this audience, just like, give an overview of what the structured and unstructured is, and just briefly explain it, and then we can give that segue into dynamic chaining.
So I'm going to break it into 3 categories that you can kind of think of. Okay, so we have structured data. Structured data would be like a SQL database or an API, where it is very much think of it as rows and columns of it, and it's this piece of data is stored in this column. It can also be things like JSON, right, files, where it comes back and it has a structure that you can, and if you can understand the structure, you can understand the data a lot better. So like whether we can have things like booleans, which is a true or false. But true or false, you have to understand what the column means and what true or false means in the context of that column. Like if I say something like whether or not a condition is valid, like in other words, like use a scenario like is it going to rain today? Yes or no? Right.
Good point.
But what if I said, what if the title of the column was will I need a coat today? It might change the Boolean value of yes or no, and you could simply even change where I said, is it going to rain today? I could say, is it not going to rain today? And now true and false means something completely different. You kind of have to understand the structure to be able to really understand the data. So then let's jump over to something what we'll call unstructured data. So unstructured data would be something like a PDF file or a Word file, right? The data doesn't have a structure. It's just a document, right? And when you go after structured data, or I'm sorry, unstructured data rather, you typically use where you're going to search to find stuff in the unstructured data and then return it back. And this is where you'll hear people start talking about chunking and things like that, because it helps people understand, I don't want to return back the entire document. I actually just want to return back the paragraph that I need in the document within that unstructured data so I can answer the question in a high fidelity state. So this is when you get into what unstructured data is. So then there's something that fits in the middle. And this is what I would refer to as semi-structured data. And semi-structured data, in the video that I use an example of this, where this data can be used as both a file, and you could treat it as unstructured, but you could also attack it as if it does have structure. So let's give an example of this: an Excel file, a SharePoint list. These things, or even like a CSV file, right? So all of these type of things is an object that I could talk to, that I could potentially hit as structured or unstructured, depending on what I want to do. Like if I hit an Excel file and I want to talk to an Excel file, and I want to just query it to help find it, and I want to search for something in it to find it, then I'll hit it as knowledge. If I want to be able to say, I want to understand the structure and be able to answer follow-up questions about a specific row within the data, I'll treat it as structured. And so, and luckily with Copilot Studio, you can hit an Excel file by dropping it into a SharePoint document library. You can upload it into Dataverse with a file upload. You can also hit it if you put it into SharePoint, you can also hit it with a connector. And so you think about it like, why would I do that? And it comes back to that salt and pepper scenario, right? Sometimes you're going to want to hit it one way. Sometimes you're going to hit it a different way. Sometimes you'll hit that same Excel file, Daniel. I'll put it in as knowledge so that I can answer questions, just general questions about it, and be able to find certain things. But then I might also put it in as an action so that I can do things like maybe update it or ask you to give me the specific item or to find the right item in the row and then answer questions about only that item, not about the whole structure. And so these type of things is why structured and unstructured data, and if you can kind of understand that, it really opens up your mind to, hey, it's just really, what am I trying to do around that data? And does that data have a structure? Does it not have a structure? And then it gives you the ability to say, okay, well, which way am I going to go? Unstructured data, hit as knowledge. Structured data, it is an action. But semi-structured data, you can choose.
Oh, no, thanks very much. Two big takeaways from that was the definition of structured, unstructured, and then also that potential gray area in between the semi-structured one. That I think that's like the foundation. You got to understand first before you even go and start building your agent. Try to understand what it is that you are attacking and figure that piece out. That's I think the key thing. Let's talk about dynamic chaining. Like, how do you dynamically chain this data together for your agent to really function?
Yeah, so the way that I'd like to kind of set the expectation, and then what we'll do is I'll actually show it to you, Daniel, because it's
Awesome.
kind of hard to sometimes follow in words, but whenever you see it in action, it makes sense. So before we go into like a demo of it, I think what you want to think about is that APIs or topics or just in general, most everything has an input and it has an output. So I'm going to give you this information and I'm going to receive back information in return, right? And if you understand that here is a definition of the inputs that I need to be able to give you this output, and what are those outputs that I can give you, then you have the ability to do something which we call dynamic chaining. The feature inside of Copilot Studio, we refer to this internally as the planner. And this is really the new superpower. Now, you'll hear some people refer to it as generative actions, but the planner in dynamic chaining is like a sub-component of what we really call the actions capabilities. And what I want you to think about is this. So, Daniel, imagine we have this conversational agent, and you log into it, and it's your banking account, right? And so it goes, hey, how can I help you today, Dan? Because I know who you are because you logged in. Now you say, what is the balance in my primary checking account? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know what the account number is to look up your balance in the balance API because I need your actual primary checking account number. But I know who you are, so I can go and look up in your profile or in the account to look up your account number through a different API because I know I have the input, which is who you are and your account number or your account ID. Right. So now what I can do is go use that to go look up your account number for your primary checking, get that as an output, and automatically provide that as an input to the account balance API and answer the question. Now, I didn't program it to do that. It simply built a plan that said, I am aware of all the assets that I have at my disposal, and I'm also aware of what you're trying to ask. And through that, I can build a plan to figure out how to service that. And if you didn't give me all the information, I can also ask you to provide me that information. But I don't want to do that unless I can't derive that answer right for you, right? So in the case that I didn't have a way to look up your primary checking account number, I might need to ask you, what's your primary checking account number, right? And so that type of thing. But to build a really good user experience, you just want it to do this. And then you want to be able to ask follow-up questions as well. Like if I said, okay, here's your balance, and you said, what's the last transaction? I need to be able to do that too, right?
Right.
So this is where, when we think about it, it goes into orchestration and being able to use a large language model to do the orchestration and build the plan. And that is dynamic chaining.
Gotcha.
And it's also, we won't talk about it in details today, but it is also the brain, or the thing that has to happen to allow agentic or asynchronous Copilot capabilities to happen versus synchronous. So, and if you don't know what I mean between synchronous and asynchronous is like a chat where we're going back and forth and we're talking like we are in this conversation, where asynchronous is more like, I just write a job description of this virtual human that has a whole bunch of tools available, and they're watching for when emails come in and different triggers happen, and they go and take action on behalf. But it's not necessarily a synchronous conversation. So this is like a new thing that's coming out, but we'll save that for a different discussion. So let's take a look at dynamic chaining itself really quick, because I think it's easier to understand it when you can see it. So let's take a look at what I have here. And for people that don't know Copilot Studio, this is Copilot Studio. And you'll see here that I created this demo here. This is the same demo that's in the video, same demo environment. And you'll just see in here that what I have is I have some documents. I have like a travel policy. I have an employee handbook. I've got a website here, all in as knowledge, again, unstructured data, right? And when I click in on this, you can even see that for the company travel policy, I've put in a description that explains what this particular piece of knowledge is. Now, if I go further, you can see here that I have an action. And an action is, think of it, in this case, I'm using a Power Automate connector or a Power Platform connector. And then what I've done is I've wrapped it into an action. Well, what does that do? It means that I can explain in natural language right here what that particular thing does. And I can also explain the inputs that it needs. So in this case, I'm explaining that it needs like a location. And then units of measure is like the temperature, whether you want Celsius or imperial. And you can see I hard coded it to Celsius, even though we're in the US, we're recording this. People out in the rest of the world, I demo enough in imperial, so I decide I'll make it Celsius for you. But then you can see here are all the different outputs and an explanation of what the moon phase code is and things of this nature. So that's the idea of an action. So we've got that as another asset. And then we got some custom topics. And let's look at these, because this goes into that variable piece that we were talking about as well. So if I go into the create PO item here, let me just tell it yes here. And we look at this, and I'm gonna zoom this in for you for just a second. So you guys can kind of read this while I'm kind of talking about it, which is, this is explaining to a large language model what this thing's supposed to do and how I want it to behave. And you'll even see that I start to say stuff like, oh, this is the approval. After you get an approval, or I'm sorry, after you create a PO, go ahead and just get an approval for it. And don't even ask the user to do it. Just, that's what I want you to do. So I'm explaining the behavior, not just what it does, but the behavior I want it to have. But if I zoom back out here, you'll see that I just have this action here, which is like a Power Automate flow behind this that has all these different pieces of information. Now, the weird part is we introduced this concept of a topic input and an output. And what I've done with this is I've defined not only what this thing does, but what are the different inputs that it needs. So what does it need? It needs a supplier name. It needs payment terms, all of this stuff. So these are the things it needs to be able to handle this, and an explanation of what it is. But also on the outputs, here's a description of what it actually produces as an output. Right. So now if we think about what I was saying before, I can say, okay, this is what it needs to be able to give me this. I need to either ask for it or derive it. And then here's the output. So this is what it gives me. So what can I do with that thing as an output? Now, the beauty of this is if I switch over, remember we said call the approved PO, you can see the same process here. It has inputs and it has outputs, and those things are defined over here just the same as the inputs and the outputs. And now you can think about it that now's where the magic starts to happen. So let's look at what happens when we've got all this stuff together with all these model descriptions so that the large language model can figure it all out. Keep in mind, we haven't programmed anything. We've only explained this is a tool, this is what it does, and this is how it should behave. That's it, right? So this is where it gets really interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the test canvas. And what I want you to see is I want you to see how I can do this. And I'm going to drop in this query right here. I'm going to say, can I book a first-class ticket for my business trip?
Got it.
And when I do that, I'm going to click on that little button right here, which is the actual planner. And when I hit go, we'll watch this thing go build a plan for this. And it goes, wait a minute, that's going to need to come from knowledge. So it's going to go and say, I know that I've got knowledge for this. Now, there is a bug right now because it's still in preview, but it'll be fixed here shortly. And you can actually see it did answer the question, but here's what it actually gave the model for summarization. So here's the raw data that the planner gave it. So, and I'll show you in just a second, this will do it the other way. And you see that it generated a question or generated the answer. So this means a new thing, Daniel. It means I can orchestrate to knowledge. So it's not just a dumb RAG pattern where it just searches everything and then tries to figure it out. It's going, this is the right asset to go search based around the description. So we're now orchestrating knowledge. Now, what that means is I can dynamic chain knowledge with an API.
Got it.
So that means I can do something like this, where I can take the knowledge information. So let's ask a question that's more like this. And here I'll zoom it in for you really quick so you can see. What is the address to the Microsoft headquarters and what is the weather there? Okay. So I'm going to need to go figure out from knowledge this. So it's going to go, I need to go find the Microsoft location, right? And you can see it answered the question, but let's look at what it did. It went and said, oh, I have to go get that from Microsoft.com. Here's our data that we passed in that gave it the address information. It then took that and said, I need to fill in the location information for the weather API to get that. And you can see it automatically got Redmond, Washington, populated it in, and then it did a summary of both pieces of things that you just asked for, right?
Yeah. I love the activity map though, because there's a lot happening behind the scenes. There really is a lot going on. But all we see is just this, in the conversation, it just goes ahead and gives you the information like, ta-da, it just does it. But man, there's so much magic happening behind over there. That's pretty impressive, man.
But see, now that's kind of cool. But now, Daniel, watch what else happens. Now, people who have built conversation AI for years, I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, okay, I want to create a PO. Now, you remember we had that PO topic. And so it came over here and it said, oh, okay, I'm going to need to do that. But see, now it's saying I need these inputs. So what is it doing? It's generating questions over here for me, right? Gotcha. And so it's asking me to fill in the information. And as I go in and start filling in the information for this, notice it's starting to fill it in on the left-hand side. And that's kind of cool that it's doing that. But see, now what is it asking me? It's asking me about what kind of shipping I need. But notice on the left, I still need to provide the PO value. And I answered the question that I wanted 90-day terms. But what if I say something like this? And I'll zoom it in so you can see. Actually make it 120 days with shipping of DHL for a value of $250. If I do that and I pass it in, watch what it does. It goes back, it updates the old stuff, generates the PO, and remember we told it to go ahead and get the PO approval, automatically, dynamically chained it, put it in as the PO number and the value. It grabbed that information from before, pushed it in, and auto approved it, and I got one response back. And that one response that I got back says not only here's the information for the PO, but it also gives me that it's been approved, that it's been auto-approved. So now that's cool, right?
It is cool. I love because you explained that, because it now at one point in the back end, it actually did a patch too. There was something which had started, you went ahead and updated it, and it's all through natural language. The example of using the DHL with the like an amount, you just gave it like 250 is all I got. Can you go ahead and make that happen? And it did the math in the background.
Out. This is when it gets really super cool. Now imagine I want to say something like this. I need to create 2 POs for Microsoft, one for 750 and one for 1500. Both ship DHL and have 60-day terms. Now here's the interesting thing on this, Daniel. The Power Automate flow logic for my approval, if it's over $1,000, it doesn't auto approve it. It has to create an actual approval process. So for me to make that work, it means that I'm not going to have the same response, the same result, right? So let's watch it work. I put this in, and now watch the planner on the left take off. Create PO1, create PO2, get the auto approval for PO1. Now I need to, that one's over 1,000. So we actually need to create an approval and get the approval information through that Power Automate flow, and voila, it just created it with the ticket number information and summarized it all back to give me every piece of this information. So this is where dynamic chaining is not just, oh, it can only follow a simple process. It's looking at the whole thing and figuring out the context and being able to pull all this stuff together and then summarizing it all back together in a single summary of all the action that it took to be able to service the user. And so these experiences don't need to be hard-coded and programmed in. They actually can just be tools that you're explaining how they work, and then it just handle these different things. And so this is why this thing is super, super innovative, and why a lot of people want to start thinking about dynamic chaining and the value of this. And this is one of the things that, you know, we've been working on bringing to market, and it's taken a little bit of time because of the fact that we had to go back and do work on the actual language models themselves to get them to be able to do this type of thing. And we use numerous different types of language models through this, and we just simplify it out into a runtime for you where you don't have to handle all that complexity. We make it where you just does it for you. So it's pretty amazing stuff when you start thinking, now I have my salt and my pepper, and I have a cook who's figuring out the right recipe to bring the salt, the pepper, and the eggs when it's needed and assemble it all together. And you don't have to think about that. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about knowledge. It doesn't matter if you need to go get information from knowledge, go get it. If you need to get information from an API, go get it. If you need a Power Automate flow that gets kicked off or a custom topic that gets kicked off, you can just get it to do it all. It's way different than what we've had in the past.
This last demo you did about the 2 purchase orders with different values, the fact that it went ahead and just automated everything, which of them can be automatically approved, one of them hit a higher number, so it has to go through an approval process. To build something this successful just like a year and a half ago, the topics that we would have to create and the logic that we would have to put over there, and again, testing it, because we don't, the end user's conversation may sometimes go sideways. None of that had to be done. Like, it just did it out of the box. You basically, had the ingredients, which was the right way to put it. But this is kind of what almost left me speechless for a while. Like, this little demo over here, which was done, automagically, it would have taken a lot of work to do this manual designing in the past. But what about any other things which has to do with building it? Like, do you have any enhancements coming on the building side of it, just to make it a little bit more easier on the end users? Like, I just want to end on that positive side. What else you got to show on that piece?
Yeah, so we have this new concept that's coming out, and it's already out and available for some customers to be able to start playing with. But this is what we refer to as a declarative copilot. And so when you have like the M365 copilot and all of that, one of the things that we're introducing is the new ability to build something called a copilot agent or a declarative copilot. And when we're talking about this, many people will see this interface and they'll say, yeah, I know that thing. But what you'll notice is on the right rail now, we're starting to really start doing some additional capabilities, because you used to think that the way that you would do extensibility is you would extend by adding things into here where you can add additional things. We're actually moving away from that. And we're moving more to this visual, to being able to build what we call a Copilot agent. We think that's going to resonate with people and the way that they want to use it in a much more effective way. And so let me kind of explain that. And it's a combination of tools to be able to do that. And so what I'll do is I'll come in here and I'll say I want to create a agent. And when I say I want to create, what you're going to see here is you're going to see that it's going to start asking me questions, right? And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in some information. So what we're going to do is we're just going to explain to it that we want to get something that helps us with finding jobs, and also like internal jobs, and then help us prepare. And feel free, like if anyone wants to pause, you can kind of pause and look at what I'm doing here. But all I'm doing is, first thing it said is, what does it do? Then it asked me, like, how should it behave and what kind of tone should it have, and things like that. And you'll notice on the right, it starts kind of building out stuff. Well, now it's like, what should it not talk about, right? And I'm going to tell it, don't talk about these scenarios and things of that nature. And once I go through this, it'll continue to kind of build out what it is that I'm looking for. Now, you can go in here to configure, and you can see, like, I can give it, here are the configurations, and you'll even see that sometimes you'll get something like this, like I can just take out the internal. I think we're going to fix this when this comes fully out, where it doesn't exceed that. But you can see here, these are just examples of things and such. But I can also browse, and I can say, oh, you know what? I actually want to also include some data out of my SharePoint library. So I'm actually going to go in here and say, in the operations department under human resources, I've got some information in there that I want to add. And now we're going to go ahead and create this thing. And
that's interesting. Okay.
What you'll see happen is it'll go through a creation process, and it'll create one on the side. Now, I've run into a bit of a snafu on this particular one, but I'll kind of give you the concept of what's going to happen once it gets created. So once it creates, it'll show up on this right rail, and you'll be able to talk to it by clicking here, but we also made it where you can do an @ and you can call out to it and talk directly to it. Because what we discovered was that in these declarative Copilot capabilities, what we're looking to be able to do is to make it where a human speaks with context that is not spoken in words.
Got it.
And so we ran into a problem when you were trying to orchestrate it based upon just what you said. We don't know necessarily, we don't have enough information to be able to understand what you meant. And so I'll give you a great example of this, Daniel. So if I were talking to you and you worked in the finance department and I said, what's the tax rate? You would answer that question in a very specific way if you're in the finance department. Right. And the understanding would be that you and I understand that you work in finance and you understand who I am. Mm-hmm. Well, on the other side, let's switch it to where I ask you a different question, and let's change your role. What if you work in HR now and I say, what is the tax rate? Now you would answer that question differently. You wouldn't answer about the corporate tax rate. You'd probably answer about the personal tax rate.
Right. From a paycheck standpoint, yeah. Right.
Because of the unspoken context of who you're talking to and the scope of why I would be talking to you. Right. So this is why calling it out allows someone to target who they're talking to and why they might be talking to them. So that whenever you're talking to these things, you have the unspoken context of who this is, what it does, and allows you to be able to ask questions with follow-up questions. And you get this visual capability here that's going to say who you're talking to, and you always know who you're talking to. And when you're not talking to something in general, you'll be able to talk to the Copilot, and you'll be able to say, here's the data I want the Copilot to have access to. And so this is more of your productivity assistant but now I can build like all these different agents over here that I'm going to use that will actually go through and help me build out different experiences to maybe help me with job requisitions or help me with other things, or help me prepare for my job interview, because I know I'm talking to an assistant or a piece of an assistant that is about this particular topic. So now you have that spoken and unspoken context and allowing the user to maintain who they're talking to and coming in and out. So this is going to be something that's sort of new that we're working on. Fortunately, some of the demo world, you'll see it kind of sometimes cause some issues. But the reason why, and I think if you saw the error that popped up, one of the things we're working on is helping assess, are you building something with responsible AI as a consideration? We don't want to just create anything. We want to make sure we're passing responsible AI filters and things of that nature. So what you saw there is probably something within the prompt, most likely just some training that we need to do for the final product. But what you will see there is we were actually checking it to make sure that you're not building a implementation that would be inappropriate. And so you'll always see that we'll start, and this is always what I will call the art behind the science. You'll always kind of start where it's pretty strict, like you're seeing right now. And then what you'll see over time is we will learn internally how to release that and make it where it's less strict and things of that nature. So you'll see that happen as we get further. So if you end up with this preview and you start playing with it and you see that, know that that's a great example of feedback where it's being too stringent or things of that nature. So hopefully this is kind of helpful. It's kind of a cool new thing. It also means that now we're having a conversation on how we want to build copilots, and we've got the same sort of thing happening in Copilot Studio and custom copilots or custom agents as well. And so now you can build those Copilot agents or extensibility to M365 Copilot, or you can even build your own custom agent inside of Copilot Studio that you want to surface as an independent application. And both of those now we can actually build by just having a conversation with how we want to build this stuff, which is really revolutionizing it. And it helps build all the prompts. So you don't necessarily have to be a prompt engineer to do it. We'll try to optimize those prompts. We'll try to check it for responsible AI and build this thing for you to make it easier and more robust for you without you having to do all the heavy lifting. So it's kind of cool stuff. And one last thing, and I'm going to share my screen one last time just to show you this, because I think this is where it really will start to come home, is when I go in to create agents here, I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to hover my mouse over this so that you can see. Notice that there's a new thing that says open in full version that's grayed out right now. Well, guess what that's going to be, Daniel? That's going to be where I can take this and I can elevate this declarative Copilot to a full Copilot Studio experience where I'm in full control. So everything you saw me doing with dynamic chaining, now imagine that's in there, and I can call it out, and I can handle the entire behavior, not just a declarative Copilot, which is like more like a GPT, right? It's just inside of this. It's where I'm going to ground it on specific data and give it some instructions. But there is situations where I want to build custom topics, and you can't do that, but now you can. So this is going to be really transformative for our customers, and the value proposition of extensibility for M365 Copilot with the full power of Copilot Studio becomes an amazing story for our customer base. So no matter if you want to make it as extensibility, you've got the full power that you want. We also have easy ways to get things for really easy scenarios, so you don't have to take on all that complexity. But we're also going to give you the full power where you can say, I don't even want to consume it through this. I want to consume it through my website with my customers, not as employees. So these are really, really powerful places, and you can just see this going across the entirety of everything. And you start thinking about all this orchestration and the ability to be able to pull this together, and it's starting to really coalesce, if you really think about it, into the future of what we really want.
Cool. Yep. Thanks once again, Dewain. And once again, for everybody else, I'll put the link to his videos down because there's a few things he's covered about. but it's really important to go watch his videos. It's down in the description. And then I'll also put your, all your information on your LinkedIn and everything. So check him out because he has been traveling a lot recently, speaking at a lot of AI events. So if you see his name on any session, don't miss it. Attend his session and then watch his video. So
Hello, hello, hello. So if you like this video, go ahead and click on that subscribe button and smash that like button. Also, if you have a few extra seconds, can you go ahead and put in a comment? Either say something nice or give me ideas for my next video. And until then, see ya.